Welcome to First in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write better fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction. Joined today by about 1 million people. It might be a few more than we actually have. With us, as always, we have Heather Luby. Heather, introduce yourself if you would.
Yeah, I'm Heather Luby. I'm the managing editor of the Citron Review, and I'm also a writer.
And with us again, we've got my dapper dad, my fabulous father, and other wonderful acronyms. Not acronyms.
Oh, stop.
Alliteration.
Stop.
There we go. Alliteration. He's joining us again, Alton Gansky. So if you'd say hi, maybe a little introduction.
Hello, everyone. It's good to be with you again. My name's Alton Gansky. I'm a writer, podcaster, editor, write both novels and nonfiction books.
We also have with us a blast from the past, Yuvi Zalko. And did I finally get the last name right?
Yeah, it was good, even though I loved your mispronunciation was one of my favorites I've ever heard. So
Zalkow, I think.
I forget, but it was really funny. You turned into a really funny of the podcast many months ago.
It was I stopped counting somewhere around 7 times that I mispronounced it, and you graciously never corrected me until I asked. So, Yuvi, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, my name's Yuvi Zalko. I even have troubles pronouncing it a lot of times. I mostly write fiction. I published a novel called A Brilliant Novel in the Works about a guy named Yuvi who can't write a novel, and I write essays sometimes. I like to talk a lot about shame and dealing with self-loathing, and those kind of things seem to interest me a lot. I also do a on-again, off-again podcast called Neurotic Tornado with my wife about our marital issues, and that's it. And I'm excited to be here. I've enjoyed a lot of the things you've discussed on this great podcast.
Well, thanks, Yuvi. For those of you watching online, you're probably noticing Steve kind of pop in and pop out and pop in and pop out. He's having some technical difficulties, and we're trying to wait for him to get it resolved, but at some point we thought we might just go ahead and push through here at 20 minutes past the hour. If you did not get a chance to listen to the podcast that we had with Yuvi, go ahead and look through our archives and download. It was a couple of my favorite episodes that we've done. He was with us, I don't even know, quite a few months ago, 7 months, 8 months, something like that.
Yeah, it was, I forget, it was, you had done maybe a dozen at the time, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, well, if you couldn't tell from the happy birthday banner behind me, that is not a mistake. This is our 1-year anniversary. This is our number 52 episode. So I thought we would do something special by bringing in some past guests that have joined us and talking a little bit about some of our favorite episodes, also maybe talking about some episodes that we might like to do in the future. For those of you following along on the page, feel free to throw in some topic ideas, questions for us. I think that would be fantastic. We've had a lot more participation in the last couple of weeks. It's been awesome. Gives us something to talk about, and really makes things go a lot more smoothly. So real quick, I thought we might just kind of do a quick roundtable of what we're currently working on, and in order to keep the conversation appropriately writerly, what type of writerly advice is in the back of your mind as you're working on your current project? So we'll start on my left, which for me is Alton Gansky down there in the lower left corner. So what are you working on, and what are you thinking about as you write?
Well, I'm going through what they used to call galleys. They're now calling them sometimes design pages and other things. Publishing doesn't use galleys anymore. Galleys used to be long strips of paper that would come out of a printer where you would check typesetting and stuff. Now it's just formatted on 8.5 by 11 and with cut lines. And so this week and part of next week is me going over what I've written and going line by line, word by word. And as a writer, usually about this time you're sick of reading your own stuff. So
Yeah.
that's what I've been doing, and looking at some other things. So that's kind of what's taking my time right now.
Great. What about you, Heather?
For me, I'm sort of working on 2 different things right now. The first is what I'll call a final revision of a particularly long short story. I would say it's about 26 pages, about 8,000 words, that has seen many revisions. It's gone to a professional editor at this point, and so I'm doing the final revisions of that story before I start submitting it. And I am also in the midst of a first draft of another novel. And right now, the thing that's really on my mind as I'm writing both of these things is a sense of place. Both of them take place in the Ozarks, which is also where I grew up, in the Ozark Mountains. And a sense of place really has to permeate both of them in order for them, I think, to work. And so it's been every day when it comes time to sit down and write or to edit, it's been all about creating sort of even an environment for myself that is about being able to find that place and then make it come alive on the page.
That's a great thing that you're saying.
Nice.
And the importance of setting is always, I mean, it's huge. And I think we tend to forget that. We worry so much about character and plot that we sometimes forget setting. And as I work through my own stuff and some other edits that I'm working on, I keep hammering that point home. Like, got to get that setting. I have to constantly ask myself, am I developing my setting properly here? Am I developing it enough? Because you can definitely tell. You know, sometimes you'll read that book and you're like, something's wrong with this, I can't figure out what it is. A lot of times it's just that lack of setting really coming through. So that's cool that you're taking a look at that. Absolutely.
Well, and I think
sorry, go ahead, Heather, and then we'll jump over to Yuvi.
No, I was just going to say, I think, too, sometimes it matters what draws you to a piece. And in this particular case, both the story and the novel, instead of it being maybe a plot or a character that came to me first, in both instances, it was a desire to write about this particular place and be able to capture it that brought me to the story in the first place. So I'm working really hard to get it right.
Very well said. How about you, Yuvi?
Okay. Well, I'm chipping away at a novel. I'm back at it that I've been working on and off for quite a few years. I feel like the first novel I published was kind of a cheater novel because it was a novel that I wrote by mistake while I was writing all these pieces of things, and then I started to figure out a way to connect it. And now I'm writing one that's a little more linear, and I'm realizing how little I understand how to write a novel. And so what I've been focusing on lately is I'm kind of getting to the end of a draft that I'm working on, and I'm trying to get it the consistency, so the episodes that I originally wrote, but now I'm making sure that there's a real accumulation, you know, both the character arcs and the stories and the references just kind of build in a consistent way, so you feel like you got a whole story rather than a bunch of pieces. And so I've been obsessing over that a little. One thing I did is I turned my book into, like, I had the computer read it and turn that into an audio file, and then I walk around the neighborhood with my headphones on listening to a computer who has no interest in my book read it in a very computer-like voice just to see if it feels consistent. So that's what I've been up to.
I do the same thing. I love that. That soulless computer reading it, you know, and they get to the things where it's like live your lives, and it's like live there lives. But that's not, no,
Yeah, it doesn't know at all what you intend, which is great for me to do that as a test run sometimes.
Yeah. Steve, do we have audio yet for you? I see you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, wow. We have Steve! Yay!
Okay, good.
Yeah, and you've never sounded better, Steve. Your
Excellent.
voice is like water, and on a hot day. I'm stopping now. Go ahead.
That's an appropriate analogy for California.
Yeah, exactly. We got some rain, so that's nice.
Yeah.
We are talking about, Steve, our current project, what we're working on, and basically what writerly advice, what is going on in the back of our mind as we're writing. So what are you working on, and then I'll answer.
Right now I'm working on a book I've been working on for a long time, continuing to do the snowflake method. And it's essentially a kind of magic, but it's the emphasis isn't really so much on the magic as it is on character development and it's kind of a bit of a retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo.
Ah, nice.
Yeah.
And what writerly advice are you concentrating on as you write?
Well, outlines are far superior to any other form of writing. What I would say is the best advice I could give. Yeah, no. Beyond that, just a there's a lot to be said for dialogue. I've been working really hard on dialogue. I think the episode that we did recently, where we discussed dialogue quite a bit, was pretty important. I got a lot from that, and just working in the action and the dialogue, and making sure that you have a good balance, ensuring that you're moving the scene along, and the fact that you're probably not going to do it right the first time around, and you're going to get the best dialogue in revision is actually really good for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I
like your happy birthday thing, by the way.
Thank you. I was actually going to put a birthday cake on here too. I was working on that. Hang on here.
Ah.
Gonna get the birthday cake. Birthday cake. Come on, birthday cake. It's not working.
Here we go.
Make me sad. Does this work? There.
There you go.
Now that Steve's on, we need that sound effect there. So,
Right.
so I am working on the third book of the Hand of Adonai series. I haven't been able to get to it for a few days. I've been working on some other edits that I have. But as I'm going through that, I'm also looking at the dialogue, trying to be ruthless with my writing. This was by far the longest book I've ever written in context of words and page number. And I've cut quite a bit out, but there's still a lot of fat to be trimmed. So I find the advice that I'm giving other writers as I go through the work that they submit to me is the same advice that I'm giving myself, and I'm looking for the same things that I'm doing. Because I find that as writers, we tend to make the same mistakes. Some of us are better at this or better at that, but there seem to be a lot of common mistakes that writers make. And I'm going to actually use it as kind of a transition moment here and maybe ask our next question of if as we've done a year now, so let's think back or think forward toward the year that's coming. What types of topic ideas would you think would make a good cast? Do you want to talk about that you think writers need to hear? And I'll go ahead and answer real quick since I came up with a question. You guys have to think. What mistakes writers make, common mistakes that writers make, beginning writers, intermediate writers, advanced writers, because I think for every level of writer, there are different mistakes that we make. We move from beginning mistakes, we finally get those under control, then intermediate mistakes, we start to make different ones, and then as advanced writers, we have a whole different set of mistakes that we like to make. For example, thinking that we're better than we are and having to remind ourselves that we still have work to do. Just simple stuff like that. I think that could be kind of an interesting type of a cast. So, should we jump back over to Al and kind of work our way down the line again?
Sure.
All right.
So the question is, what would make good topics in the future?
Yeah.
I think a great podcast would be one on the dance between setting, character, dialogue, and action. All those elements that go into making a novel and getting them to balance, treating setting sometimes as a character itself. What is the role of supporting protagonists and supporting antagonists, and this delicate balance that goes on with all of that, so that you have a story that keeps the reader engaged instead of emphasizing one so much that the others suffer from it. And when I read other people's early writings, their first novels and stuff, that's one of the things I see is that they have that out of balance.
Heather.
Oh, that's a great one. Sorry.
Heather, tell your story of when you took all the scenes from your book and you laid them out in note. Yeah. You know that thing. You know what I'm talking about.
Well, I hope.
3x5 cards or whatever that you did.
Well, yeah, you could actually do it a couple of different ways, but that's what I found really handy when I was going through the revisions of my first novel. Because I'm a very visual, spatial learner, and there was no way that I could really get a good grasp on what I had written just by scrolling through the pages on the computer, or even really just by printing them off. So there is a writer by the name of Darcy Patterson who does something called the shrunken manuscript method, And where she essentially shrinks her manuscript down to like tiny little font so that she can tape all the pages up on the wall and highlight different sections. So she'll highlight every area that deals with character in blue and something that deals with setting in yellow, and so on and so forth. So you can do it that way. Another way I did it was that I went through and I broke down my entire novel into scenes. I had something like 78 scenes in my novel. And I put each scene on a note card, and depending on what I felt was the main thing accomplished in that scene, was it thematic, was it more about the plot, or was it more about the theme, and so on and so forth. And I would color code the note cards in that way, put them in order, and then that way I could sort of visually see through the colors where my novel was heavy. You know, if there was a big long section of nothing but plot, but I was never really doing anything that addressed theme or maybe more internal aspects of my character, then I would know that there would be a point to sort of pull back and deal with that. But the opposite would also be true. If I spent too long addressing sort of the internal thoughts of my character, that can really destroy the pace of the novel. So that would be a place where I could see, obviously, we needed to return back to plot. So whatever method works for you, you have to find a way to sort of visually see how everything should weave in and out together. If that makes sense.
That right
Is
there.
that it?
That's what I was talking about.
Nice.
So is this where UV jumps in and says you can do that on Scrivener?
Well, it is one of my
I got Scrivener.
nice segue. Yeah, well, I am a little bit of a Scrivener. I do have a Scrivener fetish.
Are you a Scriv nerd?
A little bit, yeah. And I probably help a writer that I either know or someone who's reached out to me, maybe even at least once a month, like to get them on Scrivener. But I also don't think it's for everyone, and it's for sure, I've seen it misused. Like, I've actually had to tell people, you don't need Scrivener right now. You know, your note cards are actually really good, and you're more physical than you know, a digital type person. So stick to, you know, because I do the note card treatment too in ways that I love. But I do think Scrivener, it would be a fun topic we could discuss, I think, because I've thought a lot about when and how to use Scrivener, and you know, sometimes when you're organizing something, you're having troubles, like you're trying to watch the point of view or the setting, and you haven't found a great way to look through that in the entire novel. There's some really cool ways you can use Scrivener to help you look at things in multiple visual ways, outlines, index cards, or just the text itself. And so it would be fun to go a little deeper than, you know, there's the 5-minute summary of Scrivener, and then there's a deeper layer of how do you use it as a tool to help you. And the other issue is when to know that you're obsessing over the tool at the expense of the craft.
Right.
So
I would love a Scrivener, because I became so obsessive with the methods I was just talking about that I did a shrunken manuscript that I taped all my pages on the wall where I looked like a serial killer. I did the note cards, and then I transferred everything I knew into a color-coded spreadsheet.
Oh, yeah. I've done all of those, actually.
I just got to know, though, does Scrivener have Gantt charts?
No.
Well, okay.
Do you use Gantt charts for triple? I could see an actual, real good use. Yeah, I'm sorry if you already talked about it before. I should have been.
No. We talked about it a long, long time ago on a Writing Tools episode that we did.
Yeah.
I call that Writing Tools 1.0. Mm-hmm. I think we need to do a 2.0 and invite you on to talk about Scrivener.
Yeah, in more depth.
Or just devote an entire show to Scrivener.
Yeah, it's quite a tool if used for the right purpose. Yeah.
Here's a better idea. I think Scrivener needs to sponsor us and just give us money to do the podcast. Throwing that out there.
Yeah.
UV, make some dollars.
Yeah. Well, you know, I did a 1-hour tutorial a few years ago, and after I did it, you know, I spent like a few hundred hours working on it. I was like, why didn't I talk to them first about this? This is a 1-hour ad.
Yeah,
right?
Just doing by night when the kids are asleep. Yeah, so.
that's awesome though. Yeah, you are definitely a Scriv nerd. For sure.
Yeah. And Steve's a Gantt geek, so it all works out.
Nice.
That's right.
All right,
I used that
Heather.
project management, and I was like, this would work really well in actual writing to keep track of characters, where they are, and timelines, and make sure that all that actually works out. You know?
I really buy that, yeah.
Yeah.
My brain does not work that way.
Yeah, you have to have the right brain, for that.
All right. So, Heather, what cast would you do?
You know, I have a few different ideas, but I was trying to think about, for instance, like which classes do I teach on like a community college level that seem to have the strongest enrollments? And outside of a workshop, which of course you can't do on a podcast, one of the most, one of the most attended classes has to do with what editors are looking for.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of, obviously, Aaron, you and I both read and edit pieces and select pieces for the Citron Review, so we certainly have an insider aspect. We're not only writers, but editors of a magazine as well. So what are the sort of do's and don'ts of navigating that? And it's probably a topic that's been done a lot, in terms of if you just went and Googled. But I'm wondering if we were doing a podcast that allowed people to sort of pose questions to us live, if that might not be beneficial to a lot of writers out there. Because I certainly wish sometimes that some of the folks that are submitting to us might have heard such a podcast.
Yeah, we actually did that cast, or a cast like that, back in the day when it was just me and Steve sitting in a car in my garage in the middle of August.
I remember those days.
Oh,
I missed
man.
that.
Oh.
Well, I remember the car days. I just was not around for that podcast.
Yeah. What editors look for is what we call it. It's a classic. I guess if it can be a classic less than a year after it was produced, but it's a good one. I think it would be time to revisit it, and it would be especially beneficial. I think Heather, having you on, the managing editor of the Citron Review, and to give more of a holistic look at what goes into the production of a magazine. Since I selfishly handed that off to you, a couple of years ago. Awesome.
Well, in case I missed another podcast, my other idea too was generally self-editing. Have we done a podcast on self-editing? Like what are the tricks and tools, that we ourselves as writers, when we're going through and we're revising a piece, have we done one on revision and self-editing?
I remember we did one that was, because I remember we sat in the car, we recorded a POV episode that we ended up trashing and then eventually re-recording. And we also did a recording on, I think it was self-editing, I want to say, where you go through, actually what it was
Sneaky Prose Killers.
Sneaky Prose Killers. That actually felt like kind of like a self-editing thing. That was a pretty good one. We should do a self-editing one, though. Yeah.
I would love to do a revision and self-editing one, because to me that's where the real hard work of crafting a piece of fiction, or even nonfiction, right, but really comes together.
Yeah. Very cool. We should do that.
Some of the chatters along with us, or viewers, are saying screenplays, how to do a screenplay, how to adapt a screenplay.
Oh, that's cool, yeah. I have no idea how that works.
We would need to invite someone on the show who's familiar with that.
I would say read Save the Cat, read Save the Cat, and then get back to us. I actually have I actually know some people. Maybe I can pull some people in.
There you go.
We can talk about that later. Pops, you did that process, didn't you?
Which process?
Transitioning a novel into a screenplay?
Yeah, and a bit of irony, they just recontacted me, so they're pitching the book again this week. The option had run out on it, and so the guy wanted to know if it was okay if he said that he had the option, even though he didn't anymore. And the thing's just moldering on a shelf, so I thought, well, yeah, knock yourself out. Yeah, like here, 60 days of option or something, then we'll figure it out after your meeting. But I did that. They let me, first of all, they optioned the topic, and then they let me write the first pass on the screenplay, with the understanding is it was not going to be the final screenplay. I mean, Jurassic Park, they rewrote Michael Crichton, and then they rewrote the people who rewrote Michael Crichton, so
Right.
that's just Hollywood. But nonetheless, it got it registered and that sort of thing with that, and it was extremely difficult to do.
Wow, that would be interesting to hear about.
It took me 3 passes to go from a novel down to feature-length movie script, which would be about 120 pages of script, not manuscript style, but film script style, which isn't a real page, word-wise.
So we have at least one guest identified here.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I know several others, too, that you might be able to get. You'd have to ask them. I think of Linda Seeger, who consults on screenplays. At our writers' conference, we just had, oh boy, getting old.
Brian Bird?
Brian Bird's who I'm thinking of, yeah. And that's what he does for a living, is he produces or he directs movies. And then we have some others, a real bundle of energy. No, I can't think of her name either. She's just doing a short film now.
Zoe. Is it
no,
Zoe?
not Zoe, but
Xena.
Xena. Yeah.
She has a last
Xena
name.
Dello. Okay. Yeah, the brain just kicked back in. Xena Dello. Apparently, I'm caffeine deprived.
Right.
Xena Dello, and she teaches for me sometimes on the topic. So there are folks out there that do that. And then Jack Kavanaugh, Aaron, you know Jack Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
His outlining for a while, when he would outline a novel, he would do it as a screenplay, and that was his outline.
That's a great
Because
idea.
it's shorter, it's condensed. He could focus on dialogue and character, and then so he'd write the screenplay first, and then he had his basic outline, and then from that he'd go back and write the novel.
That's a great idea.
That makes
I need
it
to have
fun.
Jack on the show. Do you think Jack would be willing to be on the show?
Sure.
Yeah, I got to talk to him. Great.
All
I'm
right.
sure he would. He's done mine several times.
Excellent. So.
Yeah,
right
that's
on.
nice. So, man, we're building our future right now.
I know. This is what we're just planning the whole next year. So I
Yeah.
enjoy watching this. Right.
That's
So,
great.
Where are we, Steve? Is it your turn
Uh,
for possible
yeah.
casting ideas?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing, I thought of this a while back, but I think now that we know Maya, we should totally do this one, which is like knowing the reader's psychology. On the one hand, I wanted to say like intentionally writing your book for a specific audience, and knowing their psychology and what you're trying to hook them with, and how you're trying to speak to them. But then also, just knowing in general. A little bit more about psychology. For instance, we talked a little bit about the archetypes and how they resonate so well with us because they're built into our DNA just about. That's one of these things that it hints at this whole area that could be tapped into, where if you know how to really pull at heartstrings or to really psychologically mess with your reader, you can make a much better piece of work. You can make a better book. I think that'd be a cool topic. And then I'm just going to throw this in there as an extra. I'd actually like to talk sometime about how to develop political socioeconomic systems in books, and what the process for that sort of thing is.
You know,
Wow,
it's
that's
interesting that you mentioned the psychology. I was just talking with somebody about this. And I think this is something that Brett Anthony Johnston said. It's been like 2 episodes since I've mentioned his name, so we'll get the customary mention in there. He talks about, he says, if you want the reader to imagine their grandmother, and so you leave details out so that the reader can put them in and imagine their own grandmother, the opposite happens. They are incapable of picturing their own grandmother at that point. Instead, if you give good, solid, specific detail about this grandmother, even if it contradicts what, the description of the reader's grandmother, the reader will then picture their own grandmother. And it's one of those things where if you say your character has red hair and the reader thinks, no, I like it better as black, they can reject that and imagine your character with black hair. But if you never say what color their hair is, they don't have anything to accept or reject, and therefore have nothing solid to hold on to feel no tangible details for your characters. So it's an interesting psychological thing that.
Yeah, I think what you said before. I think what you said before is that they'll get a picture in their head, and then as you add details to that picture, they, like you say, will either accept or reject it, and all that does is reinforce that picture of that person in their mind, whether it's a good detail that they want or a detail that they don't want. It reinforces it nonetheless. Yeah.
Which is why everybody hates the book covers. They're like, that's not how the character should look.
I know.
It's because they all have their own, interpretation. But
yeah.
Yubi, you had like a fantastic idea for a cast.
Oh, yeah, the one about the, one thing I've been obsessed with, especially in the early days, at first you learn these cliches to writing very early on. The most obvious one is show, don't tell. But you learn various cliches on how much dialogue you're allowed to use and how much this and how much that. And they all stem from important ideas. Like the show, don't tell is pretty important when all you're doing is telling things and no one experiences it. But then the next step, it took me a long time to learn, was, oh, but you don't always do it that way. Sometimes you do tell, and sometimes that is powerful, and sometimes you're showing and telling, and sometimes you're sort of doing neither. And so I think it would be fun to talk about the cliches, talk about good reasons for them, but then also important reasons not to use those cliched pieces of writing advice, and maybe we could pluck some examples, like, this is somebody who doesn't listen to any of the rules, and the book is amazing. And that would be, I don't know, that would be fun thing for me to talk about.
I think that would be fun, and we could each sort of pick, what's the one writing rule that we break all the time, that we don't adopt or that we reject.
Yeah, there's a lot of material to mine there.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic. I love that idea. One of my good friends, Cindy Sproles, I co-wrote a book with her. It's being shopped around now. Wrote a book called Learning the Lingo. I think we should still do a cast on it, but if you're interested in the meantime, go ahead and check out Amazon and look up Learning the Lingo by Cindy K. Sproles, and that'll be just a quick crash course in all the cliches that we use when providing feedback for other writers, show, don't tell, or resist the urge to explain, and trust the reader, and all of those that we throw around that sometimes it's like, what does this mean? And when is it applicable?
Find your voice.
Find your voice. Yes, perfect.
Right.
All right, I hope somebody's taking notes right now. I hope somebody's taking notes.
Thank goodness we'll have something called a recording, should we need to go back and...
Some sort of archive, maybe, audio or visual. So, awesome. Did we cover everybody? Everyone get a chance on that? I think so. Okay.
You got me.
Yeah, and that's the important thing, Steve. So,
right.
Real quick, let's do favorite person fiction podcasts that we've done, and maybe that you were a host on, a guest on, and favorite ones.
You go first.
I'll go first. Just give everyone some time to think. And if you can't think of one, just make it up, or look through our archives real fast, or just say one that you hosted recently. I've got a couple. I really enjoyed the villains one. Probably one of my favorites is one that we just posted. We did a recast of it. I posted it again, called Fight Scenes, because Steve, you put in like 900 hours worth of time putting that episode together, and the format is so radically different than anything we've ever done. Kind of a Radio Lab feel. I wish we could do that every episode, but we just don't have the time to do it. But that product really came out. Not only did it have really good advice, but I thought it was very accessible, and just for the entertainment value of listening to it and how you put everything together, really top-notch job. So I'd say probably my favorite one listening to was Fight Scenes. Really enjoyed recording the villains one with Nathan Bodell as a guest.
The villains one, I had like 3 or 4 different versions of that one that I had tried to put together, and one of them actually had like scary music all through, and you did not like that. You were not a fan. But Yeah, but the fight scenes one, yeah, that taught me a very valuable lesson. I can't do the episodes that way because it takes way too long. But you've ever listened to Radiolab or This American Life or Freakonomics
Yeah.
or
Right.
that was the format that I was going for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He did an excellent job. So if you haven't heard it, listen to it. It's great. As a matter of fact, it's in our archives. It's like 3 episodes back because I just reposted it a few weeks ago. So definitely look that one up. So who'd like to go next? We'll just have somebody jump in here so I don't put anyone on the spot.
I can go next.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay. My favorite episode was the writing tools episode, and I don't know why, but I just kind of geek out on the different methods that people use to put their words down. It was fun. We talked a little bit about Focusrite. We talked about Scrivener. We talked about using Gantt charts and several other things, including Microsoft Word. But I really loved the sound quality on that episode, and I really loved the topic. It was just really fun for me. So every single time we ever talk about rerunning an episode, I always tell Aaron, you should run the writing tools one.
He does.
I also think it would be really fun to just do another tools episode. I think that'd be great.
To do another writing tools episode.
Yeah. Just like we were talking about a little while ago.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, because I would like to be part. I wasn't part of the previous writing tools episode, and I would love to do that.
that was so early that they only had me. No, actually, I didn't even do the writing tools. I was gonna insult myself, but I didn't participate in the writing tools one. I did it somewhere a few episodes after that.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Now I'm kind of frustrated. I mean, I'm angry at you guys because my two favorite that I was going to mention were the villains one I loved and the writing tools. Partly the villains one, what was fun was to talk, because that was the one where you talked about the comic. I mean, the person on what's his name? What was his name? What's his name?
Nathan
Again?
Bodell.
Nathan.
Yeah. It was fun to hear, like, thinking, even though I just write regular, boring, no picture fiction, it was fun to talk about villains from a comic standpoint and think of how that related. So I love that kind of crossover. And you did another one on conflict that I thought was fun too, didn't you, in the early days?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
That is
We've done a
true.
couple on conflict, so.
Yeah.
Our most popular episode ever was Kurt Vonnegut's rules for writing.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
The one we
my
did with
God.
Andrew?
The what?
Is it the
No.
one that we did with Andrew, or a different one?
No, we
The first
redid
one
that one.
that-
The first
yeah.
one with the barking dog throughout. It was the worst audio quality ever.
It was so
And there
bad.
was a dog that was barking in the background, and we were in my kitchen, and it was super echoey. Yeah,
Well,
it
and
was just
the
terrible.
dog didn't even have the courtesy to start barking at the beginning. Like, it started like 25, 30 minutes into it, and we're like,
Yeah,
well, we're not going to scrap this whole episode because of a stupid dog, and it's got to
Right.
stop sometime. No, it did not stop, ever. So
our
it
most
was,
popular episode, and somebody commented and was like, "Dude, you got to fix your audio. That dog barking, is ridiculous. That should never have seen the light of day."
yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, except that we both work full-time jobs, have kids, and have a lot of things going on. So a barking dog is not going to make us throw this away."
That's when we all went into, that's when we started going in the car.
Yeah,
Back in the day.
that's right.
Started doing it in the car.
I started listening to a whole bunch of how to podcasts. Very meta.
It's very meta.
And as I was listening, one of the guys was like, one of the best places to record is in your closet. And so I kept that in mind. I filed that away. But then the other thing that somebody was saying, somebody was actually recording, and I was like, wow, it sounds so good. And the guy's like, okay, I want you to listen to the difference. This is me sitting in my office. I have some soundproofing, that helps to dampen the sound and whatnot. And then he switched over and he said, and now I'm recording in a sound booth, or something that sounds just like a sound booth, and it sounded perfect, just super muted, like no sound, very, very good quality. And toward the end of the show, he finally divulged that he was sitting in his car. I was like, wow, that's brilliant. So we started sitting in my car, And I set up these what are they called? Tie downs.
Cords, lines.
Tie down straps across the oh God straps, back and forth. And we took the microphones and we hooked them up in there so that they would hang down in front of us. And we had all kinds of wires going everywhere, and I had brought in a computer monitor.
That's
You
great.
guys probably look like you were like staking out your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You hear me?
Like
He
it was
sent me
under
out for-
surveillance.
Yeah, he sent me out for donuts and burritos, and it was weird.
Anyway, but it was we got some good quality sound out of it when we weren't having like massive technical difficulties. Seems like we've been plagued with those.
Yeah, we could do a whole podcast on podcast nightmares,
Yeah,
but
we really
we're
could.
not going to. So, real quick, Pops or Heather?
My favorite, I think early on we did a podcast on sort of our favorite books on writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really liked that podcast. I liked the one that we did on flash fiction as well.
Mhm.
And then I really loved the second Rules of Writing by Kurt Vonnegut that we did when Andrew joined us, and that was recently. But I think mostly because that one was just so much fun. He was really good time to have in on the conversation. I think we laughed a lot that evening. I don't know what our listeners got from it, but we had a good time.
Yeah.
My main complaint about that episode was I expected a barking dog in the background.
Right.
Yeah. Just didn't happen. So Andrew's right. If you haven't, that's one that the audio is great, but you definitely need to see it on YouTube if you get a chance. So go on YouTube, look up First in Fiction, Kurt Vonnegut. It was a great episode. So
Yeah. Yeah, it certainly was.
how about you, Pops?
I'm rather new to the program, so I don't know that I have a favorite, unless I count all the ones I've been on. But then again, that seems a little self-serving. So
I don't know. I just picked the ones I was on.
Well, what is your favorite of the ones you've been on?
This one, right?
yeah, this is kind of fun because I'm getting to sit and listen for a while. But I think the one we did about keeping the reader engaged, rather than how not to knock them out of the story, that was enjoyable, and there was so much meat that we didn't get to serve on that because of time. But I think that would be one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we are running up on time here. I had some other questions that I wanted to ask, but I'm afraid that they are just a rabbit hole for us to fall down into, especially considering we were talking a little bit about this whole idea of meta. I think that'd be a great podcast topic, metafiction. But I was going to talk about podcasting troubles that we've had over the years.
Yeah.
But I say over the years plural because as of next week it will be plural.
Right.
But I'm afraid that talking about it is going to make us have more technical difficulties. So
Yeah.
I'm a little timid, especially. Probably the worst. The worst. If you didn't see it last week, man, Heather dropped out and just left me hanging. I was
That was so
I didn't have-
terrible.
I
man,
didn't have
I had a
Steve.
chance.
It was like the last 5 minutes of me going, so does anybody have a question in the chat room? Oh, it was so bad.
We were
So-
doing like a screen share, and I don't know what happened, but when you closed the screen share that we had been discussing examples from, like everything on my computer just disappeared. The Google Hangout, like it just was gone. So then I was, rushing to get back on, but by the time I got back on, Aaron was already off air.
Oh no.
It was a great show leading up to that. I had the screen share, I had examples, I was highlighting text, I
Wow.
was changing font colors. I was like, this is awesome, this is practical,
was
this is
really
useful. And then it was like the worst ending ever.
I'll have to
so
watch it and just fast forward to the end.
Please do.
But I would actually love for us to do that again, because I think that there's a huge benefit to, I think we've continued to improve, that it's gone from just hearing our voices to hearing our voices and seeing our faces. But then if we can start drawing in screen shares to show text and give examples, especially if we do sort of like an editing or a revision cast, I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I'm gonna actually pop over to Pops real quick, and this is I blatantly stole the idea from him. You do is it the Writer's Talk where you do that, or where you do the screen shares and you have all the text and stuff?
No, those are screencasts.
Screencasts.
And again, you can go to youtube.com/AltonGansky and see some of those. I do how to format a manuscript, how to pitch a book to an editor, those sorts of things. And those are screencasts. And I usually just say, welcome to my desktop, and then I record what I do on my computer, and then I go back and edit it. I do a lot of post-editing on those things. So that's the screen share that we do. When I do my podcasts for Writer's Talk, I will cut in books, web pages, those sorts of things, and lay those in, but I do that after the fact. I think what you're talking about is screen sharing live, which would be great for Google Hangouts, but I record all mine and then edit afterwards in case there's latency issues where people drop out. That something like that happens almost all the time, and so it's much easier to fix it afterwards. And then I post what I want to post.
Yeah.
For example, I had somebody who started talking about a problem they had, and they started mentioning names and publishers, and they went on, and I let them go for a while and said, I can't put that up. That's defamation of character. So that's going on the editing room floor, and they just kind of forgot in their place. So that's one advantage of recording.
Is it like when I said all those mean-spirited things about you, and then Steve had to take it out?
Well, those I sent to my lawyer.
Okay.
Nice.
So expect a letter. I'll check my mail.
Yeah.
You're not invited to dinner.
I know, right? Exactly. So, oh my goodness. Yuvi, have you had any podcast nightmares?
Let me think of which one. I don't have any great. My war stories are usually about the terrible content. I rather than the technical, I'm actually pretty good at mostly figuring things out. Where it's like I panic, and then all of a sudden it all comes together within a few minutes. So usually the recording is okay, but I sometimes listen to myself, and I keep thinking, can I beg them to pull me from that podcast episode I participated? I said 800 times and didn't get anything conveyed. So
I'll tell you what, we used to go through and painstakingly edit to try to remove ums and uhs and long awkward pauses. But we stopped doing that.
Yeah.
One thing I learned.
It might be time to reconsider, Steve.
Yeah, that was very awkward. No, one thing with my wife on the podcast, since we actually my intent is to get us into slightly uncomfortable places. One thing I had to learn was to keep those pauses where, there's I'll say something and then there's 10 seconds and then she'll say, I didn't know that's how you felt. Of course, she has to approve anything that goes live, but,
right.
we get these really awkward moments where, actually, maybe somebody will find that amusing.
That's really funny.
Wow.
Now I don't think we can get divorced because we've got so much of our baggage out there that it's too dangerous.
It's public.
No one else is going to date you.
Anyway, that's it for me.
All right.
Didn't we also have an episode where you had the camera on my face the whole time?
Oh man, yeah, the Google Hangouts. If you click on somebody once, it stays on them forever. And I forgot I had done that, and I thought it was switching automatically. So we have the one Heathercast where it's Steve and I are there. You just only see us in the corner. And then somewhere 10 minutes before we were done, I was like, I should probably start switching this now. And so it's the bad things happen when you let me do the tech.
And I couldn't because
wow.
Because the camera should never be on me that entire time because I will start looking off into space.
You're playing with just petting your cat, Mr. Bigglesworth.
I had no idea. I expected if I was quiet, I would just be that little tiny icon in the bottom. But it's just on me the whole time.
Oh, man.
Well, I'll tell you what, we are very quickly running out of time, but Molly Jo asked one great question that I'd like to just serve up real fast. Oh, well, you're answering the question before
Oh.
I ask it, dude. That's not cool.
Sorry.
Dude, take it back. Take it
And
back.
this is why I edit after I do podcasts.
This is
Your
the
father's a wise man.
Exactly. He also has time. So here we go. Molly Jo wants to know our dream guests. Who would our dream guests be if we could have anybody on the podcast? I'll start with mine because I already know. Brett Anthony Johnston. I know that's hugely surprising to people. He was a writing mentor of mine. I had him at Cal State San Bernardino. He's the director of creative writing at Harvard now. He just published his novel, Remember Me Like This, just released this summer. Fantastic read, incredible read. If you get a chance, pick that up and you will be happy that you did. Fantastic read. One of the greatest writers I've known, but more so one of the greatest teachers that I've known, and I think every time, obviously, he says something, it's stuck in my memory. And so I'd like to have him on the podcast just so he can say, well, that's not really what I said, about 114 times, and just correct me in public. That would be fantastic. But yeah, I've talked to him. He's been busy lately, but I'm hoping that I might eventually wear him down before he, files a restraining order. So hopefully that'll happen at some point. But we'll jump over to Steve real quick, and then we'll ask Heather and Pops and Yuvi.
Yeah, probably it would be awesome to have Brandon Sanderson on here. He's probably my favorite author. I really like his books. Man crush.
Yeah, big time. Have you tweeted him about the podcast? I mean, not just.
Are you kidding? I'm terrified. I would never tweet him. That's stalkerish.
I'm going to tweet him. I'll tweet him tonight.
No way.
and reference the minute in this video where we talk about him. So.
Exactly.
You should
he's a really
never
good
be
writer.
afraid to tell a writer that you love in a non-stalkerish way that you
Well, that's the
really
problem. Is
admire
when
their
you
work.
are a stalker and then you try to not seem like a stalker, but then you do it anyway.
Well, Twitter levels the playing field, so it's hard to distinguish one from the other.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's good to know.
It is. It's true.
Yeah.
Heather, who would you have on?
Right now, I mean, this could change, obviously, but right now I would want Jeff Vandermeer because I'm sort of obsessed with Wonder Book still. I've had it for months and months, and I still feel like I'm deconstructing every single chapter and love everything that's inside of his brain. He also, another book of his that I love is Book Life, and so I would love to be able to have a conversation with Jeff Vandermeer. As opposed to, I don't think I could pick an author that I would want to talk to right now. I mean, my favorite author is Daniel Woodrell, so I would love the chance to talk to him. But I think Jeff Vandermeer, in terms of writer's toolbox, so to speak, that I would love to have him on for the benefit of myself and our listeners when it comes to sort of writing advice.
Absolutely. Right on. How about you, Pops? Who did you have on?
I think if I could, Max Perkins, who edited Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and Thomas Wolfe, but since he's dead, it could be an uncomfortable interview. But he had such a huge impact on fiction. It took a lot of risks. So someone living then on fiction side, I'd say Dean Koontz to teach us how to set a stage, how to describe weather. How to do a point of view from a dog's perspective, which he did in one of his books, and
which I listened to driving cross country and was terrific.
Yeah, I thought you can't do that. You can't, Dean. You can't. This is really working. So
it was a golden retriever.
Okay. See, now you've got to read Under the Dome, Pops, because Stephen King does the same thing. He writes from a dog's point of view in several chapters. So you'll need to compare and contrast, and then we'll
an
just...
armadillo, didn't it, early on?
Oh, and a dog, and birds, and let's see, what other... I think maybe he writes from the point of view of a lamp at one point. He didn't do that. I just made that up. But
he's Stephen King, so
yeah,
there it is.
And yeah, I mean for every Under the Dome there's a misery.
Free pass.
Free pass. It's like Toni Morrison, but now we're just getting crazy. So we'll have UV. UV, who would you have on the podcast if you could?
Wow. I was so obsessed over the fact that I realized I had my microphone setting on the wrong setting that I forgot to think about who would be. You know who seems always really fun to see speak is Steve Almond.
Yes.
I mean, he's a great
Yes.
writer, but he's just such a fun presence. Like, he's just funny and smart. So there's somebody.
Yeah. These are people I need to get in touch with. So, Steve, I'm going to leave you in charge of tweeting all these people.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
On
we
the
can all
Tweeter?
tweet them at the same time on the tweeter.
On the Tweeter.
That
Okay.
way it's not so weird. So,
I'll go on the
That sounds to
Tweeter.
be like Steve agreed, so.
yeah. Consensus. All in favor, say aye.
Hi.
Ah.
And
Hey,
Steve says,
Yuvi, were you at Antioch when Steve Almond came to Antioch to speak to us? Yes, no?
UV?
UV?
I think
Oh.
UV's muted.
Oh,
Yep. He's fixing his mic now.
that's
Yeah.
fine.
I
At
was.
least for the three of us, right? You just say, Aaron, like I was thinking that you were there. UV, were you there when Steve Almond came to Antioch?
He's
He's
nodding.
nodding yes.
Yeah. It was my first residency, so I remember it well.
Yeah, absolutely. So
All right.
we are, I think, out of time. Any last-minute comments before we sign off?
Thank you all for having listened for this long. If you're newer to us, welcome. We have another year ahead of us, and hopefully the technical difficulties only get better.
Yeah. Or more pronounced or something. I don't know.
At the beginning of this episode, did you mention at the beginning of this episode my microphone was not working?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't be First in Fiction without some sort of tech difficulties,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
I'm just happy that the last several, well, I guess I was going to say weren't me, but of course mine dropped out the other night, so that's not true. I've been getting on the podcast fine, at least.
absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. For all our listeners, thank you so much. It's been a pretty cool year. Hoping next year gets even better. And just ask that you continue listening and give us any feedback that you've got. We love interacting and talking. So thanks especially to our guests tonight, Al Gansky. Look him up on altongansky.com, and to UV Zalco. You can find him pretty much. Where can they find you?
Can you hear me, or is my audio busted?
Oh,
Yeah.
so much
No,
better.
you're good now.
Right. You can find me if you can spell my name. You can find me at uvzalco.com. If you can't, if you do a search for something like "I'm a failed writer," you'll get to me.
And
Or me.
that's true. I know, right? He's like, it's just all of us right there. I'm a field writer. There's UV, and then there's Al, and then there's me. So fantastic. Excellent. Well, I guess sign off, right? So you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on the Tweeter. You can email us. Lots of options for you. Leave us a comment on YouTube. You can find Steve.
Heather's ready to go to sleep.
Yeah, right.
It's late
You
here,
can
man.
Steve's at stevemclean.wordpress.com. Yeah,
That's right.
excellent. So thank you all for listening.
Until next time.
Good writing.
Thank you.